Literature often claims that art reflects life, inspiring the best within us. But for the twisted mind, fiction can become a blueprint for horror. What happens when a killer looks at a Hollywood thriller not as entertainment, but as an instruction manual? In the sprawling outskirts of Luoyang City, China, a scavenger stumbling through a desolate wasteland is about to uncover a nightmare that rivals any movie script. Buried beneath the weeds and industrial trash lies a secret encased in concrete, a puzzle made of human remains, inspired by the infamous film, The Silence of the Lambs. This is not a story for the faint of heart. Viewer discretion is strongly advised. Please subscribe and turn on notifications as we uncover the mystery of the Cement Murders. The day began like any other humid morning at the Luoyang District Police Station. The air was thick, heavy with the promise of summer heat, and the office buzzed with the mundane rhythm of ringing telephones. For the officers on duty, calls usually fell into predictable categories: a petty theft, a noise complaint, or a follow-up on a stalled investigation. But the call that shattered the routine that morning was different. It was a code red, a high-priority alert that would launch one of the most grueling and grotesque manhunts in the region's history. The voice on the other end of the line was trembling, breathless with panic. A local man named Mr. Li, a scavenger who made his living picking through the debris along the railway tracks on the outskirts of Luoyang, had found something that defied explanation. According to Mr. Li, his daily route took him under a railway bridge, an area known as a dumping ground for the city's unwanted refuse. It was a desolate place, overgrown with wild grass and swarming with black flies. There, in a deep pit nearly 100 feet wide and roughly 30 feet deep, nature had begun to reclaim the trash. But something stood out against the chaotic background of the wasteland. Mr. Li noticed several peculiar blocks of concrete. They looked out of place, abandoned in the middle of nowhere. Curiosity getting the better of him, Mr. Li approached one of the blocks. It appeared to have been damaged, perhaps cracked open during transit or dumping. A chunk of the gray cement had broken away, revealing the dark, hidden core inside. As he leaned in, the blood drained from his face. Protruding from the jagged concrete was not steel, rebar, or brick, but something organic. It was dark brown, fleshy, and unmistakably biological. At first, his mind raced for a rational explanation. Who would cast pork into a block of cement? But as the smell hit him, a sickly, sweet, putrid odor of decay that the thick concrete could not fully contain, a primal fear took hold. Mr. Li scrambled backward, his heart pounding against his ribs. He knew, with a sickening certainty, that he was not looking at animal remains. When the Luoyang police arrived, they immediately cordoned off the entire wasteland. The atmosphere was tense. The officers, seasoned veterans of crime scenes, donned thick masks to filter out the stench that was growing stronger in the midday heat. They began a systematic sweep of the pit. It was not just one block. Hidden among the weeds and trash, they discovered a total of 7 distinct concrete masses. They varied in shape and size, looking deceptively like construction waste to the untrained eye. But the police knew better. Forensic experts were brought in with heavy tools to carefully dismantle the blocks. The first block, the one Mr. Li had found, was cracked open further. The sound of hammers striking concrete echoed across the silent field. As the shell fell away, the horror was revealed in its entirety. Inside the gray tomb was a human torso, mashed and distorted, compressed to fit the mold. The body had been dismembered, cut into pieces with surgical precision to ensure it would be completely encased. The sight was enough to make even the most hardened detectives recoil. The decomposition was advanced. The gases trapped inside the concrete had nowhere to go, and once the seal was broken, the smell was overpowering. It was the scent of death, amplified by confinement. The forensic team worked through the day under the scorching sun. Their initial assessment painted a grim picture. The first victim was identified as a female, approximately 30 years old. She was petite, standing about 5 feet 1 inch tall. The killer had been methodical. The concrete blocks contained her head, her limbs, and her torso, all separated and cast individually. It was a disposal method that required time, effort, and a terrifying level of planning. This was not a crime of passion. This was a calculated atrocity. But the nightmare was far from over. As they excavated a second set of blocks, they found a plaid bag pressed underneath the weight of the cement. Inside the remaining blocks and the bag, they discovered the remains of a second victim. This was a male, his body also decapitated and severed. He was older, estimated to be around 50 years old, and stood significantly taller at 5 feet 10 inches. The medical examiner determined that both victims had died around the same time, likely within the last 6 months. It was a double homicide, executed with a brutality that shocked the community. A woman dismantled, a man beheaded, both entombed in stone and left to rot in a pit of garbage. The news broke instantly. The cement murders dominated the midday news cycle and became the top trending topic on Chinese social media. The sheer grotesquerie of the crime captured the public's imagination. But for the police, the immediate question was tactical. Was this pit the murder scene, or just a dumping ground? Logic dictated the latter. Mixing cement, pouring it into molds, and waiting for it to cure takes hours, if not days. Doing so in an open, public wasteland near a railway line would be impossible without attracting attention. The killer had to have a secure location, a slaughterhouse, where they could commit the murders, dismember the bodies, and cast the concrete blocks in privacy. They then transported these immensely heavy blocks to the pit under the cover of darkness. This detail suggested the killer possessed significant physical strength, or perhaps an accomplice. The investigation shifted gears immediately. The police launched a massive dragnet, focusing on the residential areas surrounding the wasteland. They needed to identify missing persons who fit the description of the victims, a man and a woman who had vanished in the last half year. A reward of nearly $1,400 was offered for any information leading to identification. 3 days of intense canvassing passed before the first piece of the puzzle clicked into place. A local resident approached the investigators with a tip. He owned a rental property in a nearby village and mentioned 2 tenants who had disappeared abruptly. They were a man and a woman, the landlord explained. They called themselves husband and wife, but nobody bought it. The age gap was too big. The tenants were identified as Fan Luoyang, a 31-year-old man, and Zhang Fenqian, a woman of the same age. However, the landlord's description of the male tenant confused the police. The male victim in the concrete was 50, but the tenant Fan Luoyang was 31. The math did not add up. However, the timeline was chillingly accurate. The couple had vanished without a trace in late February, leaving behind their belongings and unpaid rent. The police rushed to the rental property. It was a small, unassuming house, now gathering dust. Inside, they found personal identification cards. The IDs confirmed that both Fan Luoyang and Zhang Fengtian hailed from Puyang County in Henan Province. But as the detectives dug deeper into the background of these two, the story became more complicated. A third person had lived in that house. Neighbors recalled seeing a young man, often referred to as the couple's son, though the biological possibility was slim given the ages. His name was Xiao Yang. He had lived with them, a quiet shadow in their chaotic lives. One villager remembered a specific day in late February when Xiao Yang had gone to the garment factory where the woman, Zhang Fengtian, worked. He had told her that there was an emergency at home. That was the last time anyone saw Zhang alive. Because all 3 were migrants from a different region, they had no deep roots in the local community. Their sudden absence had gone largely unnoticed, written off as the transient nature of migrant workers. Only the landlord had cared, and only because he was owed money. In fact, the landlord revealed a crucial detail. A few days after the couple vanished, Xiao Yang had returned to the house alone. He began moving furniture and items out. When the landlord confronted him about the unpaid rent, Xiao Yang had flown into a rage. He refused to pay, shouting that he was not responsible for their debts, and then stormed off, disappearing into the city. The police needed to verify if the bodies in the cement were indeed the missing tenants. They traveled to Puyang County to locate the families of Fan and Zhang. The truth of their relationship was quickly exposed. They were not married to each other. Both had families, spouses, and children back home. They were lovers who had run away together 4 years prior, seeking a new life away from their unhappy marriages. Deoxyribonucleic acid samples were collected from the relatives. The results were conclusive. The female victim was indeed Zhang Fantian, and despite the initial confusion about the age, the male victim was confirmed to be Fan Luchuan. The medical examiner's initial estimate of 50 years old for the male victim had been thrown off by the state of the remains. Or perhaps the hard life of a migrant worker had aged Fan prematurely. Now, the victims had names, but the killer remained a ghost. Suspicion naturally fell on the third wheel, the son, Xiao Yang. The police constructed a theory. Perhaps a domestic dispute had spiraled out of control. Living in close quarters, dealing with financial stress and the complex dynamics of an illicit affair, tensions could have boiled over. Had Xiao Yang killed them in a fit of rage? It was a plausible theory. History is full of crimes born from domestic friction, and the fact that Xiao Yang had returned to loot the house suggested a callous disregard for their fate. Was he looking for money to fund a vice? Gambling, perhaps? Xiao Yang was described as introverted, physically large but simple-minded, the exact type of personality that predators often manipulate into gambling or crime. But investigators had to consider a second possibility. Could the killer be an outsider? Someone with a vendetta against the couple? Maybe they had fled their hometown not just for love, but to escape a debt. If a loan shark had tracked them down, the brutality of the murders, the beheading, the cement could be a message. In this scenario, Xiao Yang might not be the killer. He might be the third victim, his body still undiscovered somewhere in that wasteland. The debt collector theory was quickly ruled out. Family members in Puyang insisted that neither Fan nor Zhang owed money to anyone. They were poor, but they had clean slates regarding debts. In their hometown, they were known as friendly, agreeable people. They were not the type to make mortal enemies. And the landlord confirmed that on the day of the disappearance, the house had not been ransacked. There was no sign of a break-in or a struggle typical of a robbery. This left the police with one primary suspect, Xiao Yang. The hunt for Xiao Yang began in earnest. The police returned to the rental house, treating it not just as a place of interest, but as the primary crime scene, since the house had been vacant since Xiao Yang fled. It was a time capsule of the crime. As crime scene investigators combed through the dusty rooms, they found the smoking gun. In the corner of the room, they discovered wooden boards. When they pieced them together, they realized these were molds. The dimensions of the wooden frames matched the concrete blocks found in the pit perfectly. The realization sent a chill through the team. This small, rented room was the slaughterhouse. This was where Xiao Yang had butchered 2 people, mixed heavy industrial cement, and entombed them while the neighbors slept unaware nearby. Further search revealed a jacket belonging to the male victim, Fan Luchuan. It was missing a specific button. Back at the laboratory, technicians matched a button found embedded in one of the concrete blocks to the jacket. It was a perfect match. The evidence was overwhelming. Xiao Yang was the butcher of Luoyang. But who was he? Xiao Yang was a nickname, a pseudonym. No one knew his real name. No one knew where he came from. The police were hunting a phantom. Based on descriptions from neighbors and the landlord, a sketch artist created a composite image of the suspect. He was estimated to be 27 or 28 years old, standing tall at around 5 feet 11 inches. He had a square jaw, large eyes, and a terrifying demeanor. People described him as sullen, lazy, and radiating a dark, aggressive energy that made others uncomfortable. He was a loner, an outcast who drifted through life with a chip on his shoulder, but a sketch is not a name. The police were looking for a needle in a haystack. They needed to force him into the light. They devised a multi-pronged strategy. First, they would dig. They returned to the wasteland and the area around the rental house, excavating tons of garbage and soil, hoping to find the murder weapons or the missing body parts that had not yet been recovered. Second, they went public. A massive manhunt was declared. Wanted posters with a composite sketch were plastered across every train station, bus terminal, and public wall in the city. The reward was raised to nearly $14,000, a life-changing sum for many in the region. The image of the cement killer was broadcast on television and flooded the internet forums. The pressure was on. The police knew that a man capable of such calculated cruelty could strike again. They had to catch him before he disappeared into the vast blind flow of migrant workers moving across China. Days turned into weeks. The investigation seemed to be hitting a wall. But then, a breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A construction manager who had worked with the victim, Fan Luoyang, came forward with a story that would blow the case wide open. He remembered a young man who used to work with Fan. He didn't know him as Xiao Yang. He knew him by another name, and he knew about a dark secret involving a construction accident, a broken leg, and a grudge that had been festering for months. The motive was finally coming into focus. The investigation had stalled, the trail growing cold in the humid air of Luoyang, until the construction manager stepped forward. His testimony offered the first real glimpse into the psychological profile of the suspect, known only as Xiao Yang. It was a story that painted a picture not of a cold-blooded monster, but of a man bound by a twisted sense of loyalty and honor, at least in the beginning. The manager explained that in the latter half of the previous year, the male victim, Fan Luoyang, had secured a contract for a demolition project. It was backbreaking, dangerous work, clearing land, tearing down structures, and hauling debris. To get the job done, Fan had enlisted the help of his son, Xiao Yang, and another laborer named Lai. The work site was a hazard zone and inevitably disaster struck. During a demolition, a wall collapsed unexpectedly. Lai was not fast enough. He was buried under the rubble, his legs shattered. It was a catastrophic injury that required immediate and expensive medical attention. This was the moment the relationship between the men began to fracture. Fan Luoyang, the man who positioned himself as the patriarch of the group, revealed his true colors. He refused to pay for Lai's medical bills. He offered no compensation, no sympathy, and didn't even visit the injured man in the hospital. In his eyes, Lai was just a broken tool, easily discarded. But Xiao Yang reacted differently. Despite having no biological relation to the injured worker, Yang stepped up. He dipped into his own meager savings to pay for Lai's treatment. He spent over a month at the hospital, nursing Lai back to health, feeding him, and ensuring he wasn't abandoned. To the police, this anecdote was a revelation. The man they were hunting, the man who had chopped two people into pieces and encased them in cement, was capable of profound empathy. He had a code, and if Fan Luoyang had violated that code, it provided a motive far more potent than simple robbery. It suggested a crime born of moral outrage. Investigators immediately dispatched a team to Lai's hometown, hoping he could identify the man who had saved him. But fate played a cruel trick. When they arrived, they were told that Lai had passed away from a sudden illness just 4 months prior. The one man who owed Xiao Yang his life, and who could have given the police a name, was gone. The lead seemed to evaporate, but the ripple effect of the public manhunt was just beginning to spread. The wanted posters, featuring the sketch of the square-jawed, intense-eyed suspect, had reached the city of Puyang in Henan province. A local worker stared at the poster and felt a jolt of recognition. He picked up the phone. The man in the drawing, the worker told the police hotline. He looks exactly like a guy I know named Xiao Yu. Zhao Yu, another alias. The worker explained that this Xiao Yu was a drifter, a man who constantly changed his identity to stay off the grid. The worker had seen him just 1 month ago, working a temporary job in the sprawling metropolis of Shanghai, hundreds of miles away. The Luoyang police did not hesitate. A tactical team boarded the next train to Shanghai. They tracked down the construction site where Xiao Yu had been working, only to find an empty bunk. They had missed him by a margin of just 5 days. The foreman told them that Yu had packed his bag and boarded a bus headed for Fuyang City in Anhui Province. The dragnet tightened. The police contacted their counterparts in Anhui, flooding the local stations with the suspect's description. There is a saying in law enforcement: no matter how fast a fox runs, it cannot outrun the hunter's rifle forever. After months of living in the shadows, constantly looking over his shoulder, the fugitive's luck finally ran out. In a small, nondescript lodging house in Fuyang, police surrounded a man who matched the description. He didn't fight. He looked tired, a man worn down by the weight of his own secrets. The handcuffs clicked shut, ending one of the most intense manhunts in the region's history. Under the harsh lights of the interrogation room, the layers of deception were finally peeled away. The suspect dropped the aliases. He was not Xiao Yang. He was not Xiao Yu. "My name," he said, his voice flat and emotionless, "is Wang Muxi." Wang Muxi was 31 years old, a native of Puyang City. His life story was a tragedy of neglect and survival. He was an orphan, raised without the warmth of a family, forced onto the streets to fend for himself at a young age. By the time he was 20, he had left his hometown, drifting from city to city, taking whatever hard labor jobs he could find to survive. He was a floater, one of the millions of invisible migrant workers powering China's economic boom. In early 2007, Wang's path crossed with Fan Luoyang at a construction site. At the time, Wang was destitute, lonely, and desperate for connection. Fan, seeing a strong young man he could use, showed him a sliver of kindness. He listened to Wang's story and feigned sympathy. "You have no one," Fan had told him. "I will be your father. You will be my son." It was a seduction of the soul. Fan Luoyang formally recognized Wang Muxi as his godson. For an orphan who had never known belonging, this was everything. Wang moved in with Fan and his mistress, Zhang Fengtian. For a brief period, they lived as a bizarre, makeshift family unit. They worked together, ate together, and slept under the same roof. To the outside world, they were a family. To Wang, he had finally found a home. But the foundation of this home was built on exploitation. The interrogation took a dark turn as Wang began to describe the events leading up to February 28th. The motive, as the police had suspected, was not just money, it was betrayal. Over the years of backbreaking labor, carrying bricks and mixing mortar, Wang Muxi had managed to save a significant amount of money. It was his life savings, his exit strategy from a life of poverty. But Fan Luoyang, the man he called father, had other plans. Fan had borrowed the money, nearly $3,000, a massive sum for a laborer, promising to pay it back with interest. But Fan never intended to pay. He spent the money, and whenever Wang asked for it back, Fan would brush him off or use his authority as the godfather to silence him. The tension in the small rental house grew toxic. The gratitude Wang felt for Fan turned into resentment, and the resentment slowly curdled into hatred. On the morning of February 28th, the dam broke. Fan and Wang were alone in the house. Wang asked for his money again. He needed it. He wanted to leave to start his own life. Fan laughed at him. The older man became aggressive, dismissing the debt and belittling the younger man he had claimed to love like a son. Something inside Wang Muxi snapped. It was a red mist moment, a sudden, uncontrollable explosion of repressed rage. He didn't scream. He didn't threaten. He simply walked out the back door into the small courtyard. His eyes scanned the ground until they landed on a loose brick. It was heavy, rough, and solid. He picked it up, feeling the weight of it in his hand. He walked back inside. Fan was turned away, perhaps making tea or lighting a cigarette, completely unaware that death had just walked into the room. Wang approached him from behind. He raised the brick high into the air and brought it down with the force of a sledgehammer onto the back of Fan Luoyang's skull. The sound was sickening, a wet crunch of bone giving way. Fan collapsed instantly, dropping to the floor like a puppet with its strings cut. He was unconscious before he hit the ground, but Wang was not done. The years of humiliation, the stolen money, the fake love it all poured out of him. He stood over the fallen patriarch and struck again, and again, and again. He smashed the brick into Fan's head dozens of times, destroying the face of the man who had betrayed him. Blood sprayed across the walls, soaking Wang's clothes and pooling on the concrete floor. By the time he stopped, Fan Luoyang's head was unrecognizable. Brain, matter, and bone fragments were scattered across the room. Wang stood there, panting, his chest heaving, the bloody brick still clutched in his hand. The silence that followed was deafening. He looked at the carnage he had created. It looked less like a murder and more like a slaughterhouse floor. But the silence was temporary. Wang knew that Zhang Fanqian, Fan's mistress, would be returning from her shift at the garment factory soon. If she walked in and saw this, she would scream. She would call the police. It would be over. Panic began to set in, but it was quickly replaced by a cold, reptilian calculation. He had already killed the father. To survive, he would have to kill the mother too. He cleaned himself up as best he could, dragged Fan's body out of sight, and waited. Around noon, the door latch clicked. Zhang Fanqian walked in, tired from a morning of sewing. She called out for Fan. There was no answer. She stepped further into the room, and then she saw it, the blood that Wang hadn't managed to fully scrub away, and the dark shape of her lover's body on the floor. She froze. Her eyes went wide, the scream rising in her throat. But before the sound could escape, a shadow lunged from the corner. Wang Muxi tackled her with the force of a freight train. He was younger, stronger, and fueled by adrenaline. He slammed her to the ground. She fought back, scratching and kicking, a desperate struggle for survival on the cold floor. But she was no match for him. He grabbed her by the neck. His hands, large and calloused from years of manual labor, clamped around her throat like a vice. She looked into his eyes, the eyes of the son she had lived with, and saw nothing but emptiness. She begged, tears streaming down her face, pleading for her life. "Please," she gasped. "Don't." Wang didn't blink. He squeezed harder. Her thrashing grew weaker. Her pleas turned into choked gurgles. Within a minute, her body went limp beneath him. Now, there were two. Wang stood up in the silent house, surrounded by the bodies of the only family he had known. The rage had subsided, replaced by a terrifying clarity. He had to get rid of them. But how? He couldn't just drag two corpses out the front door in the middle of the day. He couldn't bury them in the yard. The neighbors would see. He paced the room, his mind racing. His eyes darted around the small space until they landed on the bedside table. Lying there was a paperback book. It was a copy of the famous horror thriller, The Silence of the Lambs. Wang stared at the cover. He remembered a detail from the story, or perhaps a similar crime novel he had read. In fiction, killers often hid bodies in plain sight. They sealed them away in walls, or statues, or plaster. A light bulb flickered on in the darkness of his mind. He was a construction worker. He knew how to build things. He knew how to mix cement. He knew that concrete was permanent, heavy, and sealed in smells. He formulated a plan that was as ambitious as it was grotesque. He wouldn't just hide them. He would turn them into construction waste. He would build tombs for them right here in the living room. He grabbed his wallet and ran out to the nearest hardware store. He ordered 7 bags of industrial-grade cement. When he returned, he dragged the bodies to the center of the room. He looked at the bags of cement and then at the 2 full-grown adults lying on the floor. He did the math in his head and realized a horrifying problem. He didn't have enough cement to cover them completely. The bodies were too big. The molds he could build with the scrap wood were too small. He stood in the kitchen, staring at the heavy meat cleaver resting on the counter. There was only one solution. If the bodies wouldn't fit in the blocks, he would have to make the bodies smaller. Wang Muxi stood in the center of the killing floor, the weight of the heavy kitchen cleaver balanced in his grip. The air in the small rental house was already heavy with the metallic tang of blood, but the horror was about to descend to a depth that few human minds can comprehend. He had a problem. The bodies of Fan Luochuan and Zhang Fengqian were simply too large to vanish. The 7 bags of cement he had purchased were not enough to encase 2 full-grown adults intact. Physics was against him. To the mind of a psychopath, the solution was not a moral dilemma. It was a logistical adjustment. If the container is too small, you must alter the contents. Wang walked over to the body of the man he had once called father. He raised the cleaver. What followed was a frenzy of manual labor and butchery that would have exhausted a team of men, yet Wang accomplished it alone, fueled by the terrifying energy of survival. He did not possess the surgical skill of a doctor, nor the precision of the fictional killers he admired in novels. He hacked with the brute force of a demolition worker. He severed Fan's head first, removing the face that had mocked him. Then came the limbs, the arms that had withheld his money, the legs that had walked away from him. All were detached with sickening, wet thuds. Fan Luochuan, the man who had brought Wang into his home, was reduced to a pile of biological components. Wang then turned his attention to Zhang Fengqian. The woman who had pleaded for her life just minutes ago was subjected to the same industrial disassembly. He decapitated her, then removed her hands and feet. The room, once a domestic space of shared meals and conversation, had been transformed into an abattoir. With the dismemberment complete, Wang began the second phase of his plan, the construction. He used the scrap wood he found in the yard to nail together crude rectangular boxes. These would serve as the molds. He dragged the bags of gray powder into the room and began to mix the cement with water. The sound of the slurry sloshing in the bucket was the only noise in the house. He worked with the methodical pace of a mason laying a foundation. He placed a severed head into one wooden mold. He poured the thick, gray sludge over it, watching as the face disappeared beneath the rising tide of concrete. He poked and prodded the mixture to release air bubbles, ensuring a solid cast. He repeated this process for the torsos, the arms, and the legs. One by one, the 7 blocks took shape. To the untrained eye, they looked like leftover construction debris, rough, uneven chunks of masonry. But inside each one was a piece of the people who had saved him from the streets. As the concrete began to cure and harden, a twisted sense of pride swelled in Wang Muxi's chest. He looked at his handiwork. He thought about the book on the nightstand, The Silence of the Lambs. In his warped interpretation of reality, he believed he had emulated the genius of a mastermind. He convinced himself that he had committed the perfect crime. Fiction had told him that if you hide the body well enough, you can get away with anything. But Wang Muxi was not Hannibal Lecter. He was not a criminal genius. He was a desperate, angry man, making it up as he went along. He had mistaken the plot of a movie for a valid legal strategy. Under the cover of darkness, over the course of several exhausting nights, Wang transported the heavy blocks out of the house. He used a cart to wheel them to the desolate wasteland near the railway tracks, the place where the city dumped its trash. He rolled the blocks into the deep pit, watching them tumble down into the weeds. He threw the blood-stained bag containing the smaller remains down after them. He believed the garbage would cover them. He believed the world would forget Fan Luochuan and Zhang Fengqian, just as it had forgotten him when he was an orphan. He returned to the house one last time to clean. He scrubbed the floors, packed his bag, and walked out the door, leaving the key and the debt behind. He changed his name, fled to a different province, and dissolved into the vast ocean of China's migrant workforce. He thought it was over. He was wrong. Fiction and reality are two different worlds. In a novel, a concrete tomb might hold its secrets forever. In reality, biology rebels. As the bodies began to decompose inside their stone casings, gases expanded. The pressure built up from the inside, cracking the poor quality cement. The smell of death leaked out, signaling to the scavengers and the stray dogs that something was wrong. It was not a genius plot. It was a ticking time bomb of forensic evidence. When the police finally sat across from him in the interrogation room, months later, the delusion of grandeur crumbled. Wang Muxi was not a mastermind. He was just a man in handcuffs, facing the consequences of a momentary explosion of rage and a prolonged act of desecration. The trial was swift. The evidence was insurmountable. The DNA matched, the timeline matched, and his own confession filled in the gruesome gaps. The court did not see a victim of circumstance. They saw a monster. Wang Muxi was sentenced to death. In his final days, as he awaited execution, one wonders if he realized the irony of his life. He had spent his youth building houses for other people, mixing cement to create homes he could never afford. In the end, the only thing he successfully built was a prison for his victims and a coffin for himself. The case of the cement murders closed with the crack of a gunshot, but the echoes of the crime lingered in the public consciousness of Luoyang. It became a cautionary tale, dissected not just for its gore, but for its moral bankruptcy. The ancient philosophers often spoke of the foundation of a person. They said that character is like the cornerstone of a house. If the foundation is rotten, the house will fall, no matter how strong the walls look. Wang Muxi's life was a testament to this truth. He was a man who had been given a lifeline. Fan Luochuan, despite his flaws and his failure to repay the debt, had taken Wang in when he was starving. He gave him a roof, a job, and a title son. It was a flawed relationship, complicated by money and ego, but it was a relationship. Wang Muxi repaid this imperfect kindness with absolute destruction. There is an old fable about a farmer who finds a frozen snake in the winter. Pitying the creature, the farmer picks it up and places it inside his coat to warm it. As the snake thaws and regains its strength, its natural instinct takes over. It bites the farmer, killing the very man who saved it. Wang Muxi was that snake. His grievance over the $3,000, while valid in a civil court, could never justify the annihilation of two lives. He allowed his resentment to fester until it consumed his humanity. He valued a stack of cash more than the breath of the people he lived with. In Chinese culture, there is a stinging insult used for those who lack gratitude. His conscience was eaten by dogs. But even that phrase feels inadequate for Wang. A dog kills for food or defense. Wang killed for pride and money, and then treated the bodies of his family like industrial waste. He thought he was the protagonist of his own thriller novel. He thought he was the hunter, but in the end, he was just another tragic figure in the blind flow, a man who fell into a pit of his own making. As we look back on this case, it serves as a grim reminder of the fragility of human connection. We never truly know what lies beneath the surface of the people we let into our lives. We see the faces, the smiles, the shared meals, but we cannot see the fault lines in their character, the hidden resentments that, under the right pressure, can explode with volcanic force. Wang Muxi tried to use cement to cover his sins. But cement cracks. The truth always finds a way to the surface, and no amount of concrete can weigh down a soul that is already sinking into hell. That brings us to the end of this harrowing investigation into the Luoyang Cement Murders. It's a case that forces us to ask uncomfortable questions about trust, gratitude, and the darkness that can hide behind a seemingly ordinary face. Now, I want to hear from you. We know that Fan Luochuan owed Wang money and treated him poorly. Do you think there is any universe where this crime could be considered manslaughter due to provocation? Or was the death penalty the only just outcome for such brutality? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this deep dive compelling, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And if you haven't already, subscribe and turn on the alarm bell so you never miss an upload. We have many more unsolved mysteries and cold cases to uncover. Until next time, stay safe and watch who you let into your home.